we covered last month when Senator Dianne Feinstein, who's usually a quite respectful, will be the neutral word to say, of the intelligence apparatus, quite close with the intelligence community, went to the Senate floor in rage, in what was definitely genuine rage, accusing the CIA of basically surveilling staffers on the Senate Intelligence Committee. And all of this went back to a report and an investigation on Bush-era torture policies. So there's some new things that have come out that have been leaked out of this report that will probably come as not a surprise to anybody, but they're really important to note nonetheless. So basically, this is according to a report in McClatchy. A still secret Senate Intelligence Committee report calls into question the Senate's legal foundation use of waterboarding and other harsh techniques against terrorist suspects. Now, we already know that generally, but here are the specifics. One is that the CIA lied about how they were implementing the interrogation techniques and the amount of detainees that were subjected to these techniques. So one, as an example, the CIA's claim is, quote, BS, said one U.S. official familiar with evidence underpinning the report who asked not to be identified because the matter is still classified. They're trying to minimize the damage, and they're trying to say it was a very targeted program, but it's not the case. Now, if you notice, anytime someone like Liz Cheney or another apologist of torture programs is on television, they'll always talk about the specificity. Well, we only did this to a couple of suspects. And we know we have clear numbers on all of these things, and we know who we did it to and how many times we did it and what specific conditions. Well, this report is showing that it's not true. It was done to a lot more people. The report's findings are among 20 conclusions taken together that paint a picture of an intelligence agency that seemed intent on evading or misleading nearly all of its oversight mechanisms throughout the program, which was launched under the Bush administrations after the September 11th terrorist attacks. So here are the key conclusions. The CIA used methods that weren't approved by the Department of Justice or CIA headquarters. Now, this is another really important distinction. So we know that the Department of Justice signed off on torture techniques, and we know that there was a push for legal codification to codify legally torture programs. And that's, of course, a very significant area of controversy and a huge blemish on the entire record of the Bush administration. But what we know now from this report is that even in that context, the CIA was lying to people in the Justice Department about what these practices actually were. So, as an example, they said, I'm sure you've heard this one floating around. The waterboarding program is not really any different from something that Marines go through in basic training. Well, of course it wasn't implemented in the same way when it was being used on detainees. The agency impeded effective White House oversight and decision-making with regard to the program. The CIA actively or evaded or impeded congressional oversight of the program, and the agency hindered oversight of the program by its Inspector General's office. The report goes on to say the techniques included not only waterboarding, but also confinement to a cramped box, slaps and slamming detainees into the walls, and all of these took place at the black sites, which we're already familiar with. And the Senate report has concluded, this is going back to the Justice Department, the Senate report concluded that the Justice Department's legal analysis was based off of flawed information given by the CIA. So at each step of the process, you basically had a sign-off from an administration that wanted to break the law to begin with, that wanted to break international norms by engaging in torture. Then the CIA operationally lied to the White House and to Congress by extending that program. Then they attempted to monitor and intimidate people on the Senate Intelligence Committee as this report is being done, concluding that the program was a failure in terms of substantive achievements and went far beyond what public defenders of the program had claimed about it, which even in and of itself, what they claimed was a violation of Geneva and other international accords. And the final point on this, again, and unfortunately it really bears repeating. Now, I do think President Obama did halt these practices. Now, that said, as soon as the decision was made to not have a full, clear accounting of this process. I mean, and look, there's a distinction here too. You could say a legal accounting of this process, which is absolutely valid that people should face legal consequences. There's also a Truth and Reconciliation Commission model, where you could have a model, again, it was a different situation, but the principle of a place like South Africa, where there's there's some type of amnesty, but there is a full public airing of crimes and misdeeds and explanations of them. So there is a clear historic record. There's clear, at least, public and institutional accountability, and then we can truly move on to the next phase. But obviously, this program, which we know the CIA was being dishonest about throughout, is still defining us and still shaping us to such a point that they're trying to basically distort and block the release of an incredibly damning report, which is overseen by Feinstein, who, again, has no grievance against the CIA.